Welcome back to Tales of the Dark. The vault is open again. Tonight, we unseal entry 002. This object is not a doll, not a relic, not something small enough to place inside a glass box without consequence. This is a painting, oil on canvas, approximately 40 inches tall, a portrait of a woman standing against a dark, undefined background. No signature, no confirmed artist, no verified origin. And yet, wherever this painting has been displayed, someone eventually vanishes. The earliest confirmed documentation traces back to 1974 in Buenos Aires, where a private collector purchased the painting from an estate sale of a deceased antiques dealer who had no known family and whose personal journals referenced only one repeated phrase: "She gets closer." The painting itself depicts a pale woman in a black dress, hands folded gently in front of her, her face almost expressionless except for a faint curvature in the lips that could be interpreted as either sadness or anticipation. And behind her, the background appears to be an empty corridor fading into darkness, though experts later argued that the corridor effect is an optical illusion created by shadow layering. However, high-resolution scans conducted decades later revealed something else. There are faint vertical strokes behind the subject that resemble doorway frames, partially painted over, as if the artist changed their mind mid. The first disappearance occurred 3 weeks after the collector hung the painting in his private study, a room with no windows and only one entrance, and on the night he vanished. Neighbors reported hearing a loud crash around 3:12 a.m., though police found no signs of forced entry, no blood, no struggle, only the study door open and the painting slightly tilted to the right. What unsettled investigators most was not the absence of the collector, but the subtle alteration in the painting itself, because in the corner of the canvas, barely visible under lamplight, there appeared to be an additional darkened shape near the corridor background, roughly human-sized, vaguely matching the collector's posture as seen in photographs. Forensic art analysts dismissed this as pareidolia, the human tendency to see faces and forms in random patterns, yet the pattern would repeat. In 1981, the painting resurfaced in Madrid, acquired by a gallery owner in Madrid who specialized in obscure European works, and within 2 months, one of his assistants disappeared during closing hours. CCTV footage from that night, grainy and partially corrupted, showed the assistant standing in front of the painting for several minutes after hours, leaning in, slightly as if studying brushwork, and then the footage glitched for approximately 7 seconds. When it resumed, the assistant was gone, the gallery door still locked from the inside. Investigators reviewed the tape repeatedly, noting a faint flicker in the painting's background during the glitch, almost like movement within the dark corridor behind the woman. Once again, skeptics attributed it to tape degradation and lighting interference. But the pattern deepened when the painting was transported to a private buyer in Prague in 1993, where it was displayed in a dining room. According to the buyer's wife, her husband developed an obsession with the portrait, often standing close to it late at night, claiming the perspective of the corridor seemed to shift depending on his angle, insisting that the background extended further the longer he stared. One evening, she awoke at 2:47 a.m. to find him standing inches away from the canvas, his hand raised as though about to touch it, and she claims she heard him whisper, "There's space behind her," before she returned to bed. By morning, he was gone, and in his place, investigators found the painting repositioned slightly lower on the wall, as if adjusted to eye level. Art conservation experts later documented minute changes in pigment layering behind the central figure, specifically in the shadowed corridor region, where depth appeared increased compared to earlier photographs taken years prior. Chemical analysis could not explain the variation, as oil paint does not spontaneously add new layers decades after drying. By the time the Curse Vault acquired entry 002 through an anonymous intermediary in 2017, the painting had been linked directly or indirectly to at least 6 disappearances across 3 countries, all sharing a single behavioral pattern: prolonged close-range observation. Every missing individual had been documented standing within 2 feet of the canvas for extended periods before vanishing, and in each subsequent high-resolution image of the painting, analysts identified incremental dark shapes in the corridor behind the woman, shapes that resemble silhouettes at varying distances, as though figures were accumulating deeper within the painted hallway. Skeptics argue confirmation bias, but when vault technicians placed the painting inside a climate-controlled containment frame and installed 3 independent camera systems to monitor it, they noticed something far more disturbing than optical illusion: parallax distortion. When viewed from different angles, the corridor background appears to subtly reconfigure, not just as a trick of perspective, but in ways inconsistent with static paint structure. And during one controlled observation session at 3:03 a.m., a technician reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature while standing less than a foot from the canvas. Thermal imaging later confirmed a localized cold spot directly in front of the painted corridor, while the rest of the room remained stable. Further experiments conducted under strict protocols demonstrated that the sensation intensified the closer a subject stood to the painting, accompanied by subtle auditory anomalies described as distant echoing footsteps. These sounds were not captured clearly on recording equipment, yet multiple observers described them independently. Psychological assessments of exposed personnel revealed intrusive dreams involving long corridors and faint silhouettes standing just out of sight. One technician reported dreaming that he stepped into the painting and found himself in an endless hallway lined with framed portraits, each containing a faint outline of a person staring outward. Whether these dreams are stress-induced manifestations or something else remains under investigation, but the pattern cannot be ignored. The painting does not simply hang. It invites proximity. It rewards curiosity with perspective shifts and punishes intimacy with disappearance. Folklore researchers consulted by the Curse Vault referenced legends of threshold art in Eastern European myth paintings, believed to act as doorways between realms, particularly those depicting corridors, mirrors, or doors slightly ajar. Yet even those legends do not account for physical vanishings without trace. Modern physics offers speculative theories about dimensional overlap and perceptual entrapment, though none are supported by empirical data. What remains undeniable is the correlation between distance and risk. Internal vault documentation now includes a strict rule written in bold red text beneath: Entry 002, do not stand too close. Because every disappearance linked to this painting occurred within arm's reach, every shadow in the corridor seems to grow clearer over time, and every observer who lingers reports the same unsettling sensation that the woman in the portrait is not the subject of the painting, but the guardian of whatever lies behind her. And the longer you study her face, the more it feels as though she is studying you back, measuring the distance between you and the canvas, calculating whether you are close enough to step through. This is where episode 2 begins, not with proof of supernatural law, not with confirmed dimensional rifts, but with patterns, vanishings, and a single warning etched into vault protocol: if you feel compelled to lean in closer, step back instead. 2 years after the disappearance of its last caretaker, the Curse Vault assigned a new lead researcher to Entry 002. His name was Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant but arrogant man who saw the case file as nothing more than a collection of ghost stories. He was determined to be the one who finally brought a rational, scientific explanation to the so-called curse. He immediately dismissed the established protocols, calling them superstitious nonsense. He would spend hours alone with the painting, his face lit only by the cold glow of his data tablet. He set up his own advanced sensors, quantum particle detectors, microthermal scanners, the works. Almost immediately, they began logging anomalies, strange energy fluctuations, and cold spots that seemed to defy the very laws of thermodynamics. Thorne, ever the skeptic, logged them all as equipment interference. It wasn't long before the dreams began. Endless, silent corridors, just like the ones described in the old case files. He brushed it off, convinced his subconscious was simply being influenced by what he'd read. His junior assistant, a cautious but bright technician named Lena, grew more and more concerned. One evening, she ran to him, pale and shaken, swearing she saw one of the faint silhouettes in the background of the painting shift its position. Thorn was not impressed. He sternly chastised her for succumbing to paranoia and sent her home. 3 days later, Lena didn't show up for her shift. A review of the security footage was chilling. It showed her entering the containment chamber, but never leaving. The only thing found was her ID badge, lying on the floor directly in front of the painting. A cold knot of guilt tightened in Thorn's stomach. He pulled up the latest high-resolution scan of the painting, his hands trembling slightly. He zoomed in, his eyes darting across the canvas, and there it was. Deeper in the painted corridor, a new, barely there silhouette had appeared. Its posture was hauntingly familiar. It was Lena, her head tilted slightly, as if in perpetual curiosity. Thorn's professional detachment shattered, his dreams intensified into vivid nightmares. He saw Lena in that painted hallway, her expression blank, silently beckoning to him. His scientific inquiry devolved into a desperate obsession. He started talking to the woman in the painting, his voice a low murmur in the silent chamber, pleading for answers, for Lena to come back. One night, fueled by a dangerous cocktail of coffee and grief, he made a decision. He was going to break protocol. Disabling the primary security sensors, he approached the canvas, holding a highly sensitive atomic clock to measure any temporal distortions he believed were at the heart of the phenomenon. As he stood inches away, the air grew frigid. The painted corridor behind the woman began to ripple like dark water. And then he heard it. A whisper, not from the room around him, but from inside his own head, as clear as his own thoughts. It was Lena's voice. "There's room for one more, Doctor." He raised a trembling hand. The atomic clock clutched tight, reaching toward the canvas. The next morning, the containment chamber was silent. Dr. Aris Thorn was gone. His atomic clock lay on the floor, its display frozen in time, and on the canvas, a new shadow had joined the others in the long, dark hall. The silhouette of a man holding a small, strange device. The curse vault officially reclassified entry 002 as actively hostile and sealed the chamber permanently. Beneath the bold red warning, "Do not stand too close," a new line was etched in metal. "Do not try to understand." The final image in the file is a close-up of the painting. For the first time, the woman's faint smile looks undeniably triumphant. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more tales from the Curse Vault. Warning: if you are watching this alone, look behind you before continuing, because what you are about to hear is not just a story, it is a pattern, and patterns repeat. The painting did not stay inside that storage room in Prague. It was purchased in 1974 by a private collector from Prague who insisted it be delivered after midnight. His name was never officially released, but archived gallery receipts traced the shipment to a townhouse in the Malostrana district. Neighbors later reported that the painting was kept in a narrow hallway facing the staircase, positioned so that anyone going up or down would be forced to look directly into the figure's eyes. And that is where the second phase began. At exactly 3 a.m. again, 3 a.m. the collector's wife claimed she heard soft scraping against canvas, not scratching, not tearing, scraping, like fingernails slowly dragging across stretched fabric from the inside. She described waking to the sensation of being watched from the hallway. She said the air in the house would grow heavy minutes before 3, not colder, heavier, like gravity increasing in one specific direction, toward the stairs, toward the painting. 3 weeks later, the collector vanished. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. His bedroom door was locked from the inside. Police broke it open. The bed was untouched. The windows sealed. The only anomaly: the painting had been moved. It was no longer in the hallway. It was at the top of the staircase, leaning slightly forward, as if positioned to look down. The wife swore she did not move it. She insisted she had not touched it since the night before. Authorities ruled the disappearance voluntary, but the wife refused to stay in the house. She sold the property within a month and left the country. The painting, however, did not disappear. It was auctioned quietly through a private broker and acquired by an art restorer in Vienna who specialized in 19th century oil portraits. This is where the documented evidence becomes harder to dismiss. Restoration notes recovered from his workshop detail subtle physical changes in the canvas. He wrote that the background pigment appeared to shift density under direct observation. He tested humidity levels, temperature, light exposure. Nothing explained why the dark space behind the painted woman seemed deeper each night. He described the black area behind her shoulder as less like paint, more like absence. Then came the photographs. Over a span of 14 days, he took nightly reference images to document cracking and varnish wear. In the first image, the woman's hands are folded. In the third, her fingers appear slightly apart. By the seventh, the shadow behind her extends closer to the frame edge. Experts later dismissed it as angle distortion. But the restorer added one final note in his journal. Do not stand too close. The background moves when you breathe. 3 nights later, he failed to arrive at work. His assistant found the workshop locked. Inside, tools were neatly arranged, windows sealed. The painting was propped upright in the center of the room. The journal lay open, and the final photograph taken the previous evening showed something that investigators refused to release publicly for years. When the image eventually surfaced through a private collector's leak, analysts noted a new silhouette in the dark background, faint, blurred, but unmistakably human-shaped. Standing behind the painted woman, facing forward, proportions matched the missing restorer's height. The police declared no connection. They suggested coincidence. They suggested voluntary disappearance. But to owners, both at 3 a.m., and both reporting movement in the painted shadow, the painting then vanished from records for nearly 2 decades. Some believe it was destroyed, burned, hidden. But in 1996, it reappeared in a small contemporary exhibition in Berlin. Mislabeled as unknown artist, 1880. The gallery owner later admitted he had acquired it from an estate sale without full documentation. Visitors began complaining almost immediately, not of fear, of vertigo. Several described losing track of time while standing near it. One man reportedly stared at the painting for 47 minutes, without blinking. Security footage confirmed he barely moved. At exactly 3 a.m. that same night, after the gallery closed, motion sensors in the exhibition hall triggered repeatedly between 2:58 and 3:04. When staff reviewed the footage, they saw nothing crossing the floor, but the painting's angle had changed. It was slightly rotated toward the main entrance, as if anticipating viewers. Days later, the man who had stared too long returned alone just before closing time. Staff remember him asking a single question: has the background always been that large? He stepped forward, closer than the rope barrier allowed. Witnesses say he leaned in until his breath fogged the varnish. Security cameras captured him standing inches away from the canvas. Then the recording glitched. Static distortion flooded the screen for 9 seconds. When the image returned, the man was gone. The gallery was empty. No exit alarms triggered. No doors opened. Police combed the building. Nothing. The painting, however, was still there, and in the darkness behind the woman's shoulder. Observers later claimed they could now make out 2 faint shapes instead of 1. Officials denied it. Critics accused the gallery of manufacturing hysteria for publicity. The exhibition closed within weeks. The owner sold the painting to a private buyer, whose identity remains sealed under contract law. But rumors began spreading through underground art forums. A warning phrase repeated again and again: do not stand too close. Because those who kept distance reported only discomfort. Those who leaned in reported hearing something, a breath that did not match their own, a whisper that was not in any language they recognized. And always, the time 3 a.m. Here is where things become more disturbing. A digital scan conducted years later by an independent researcher suggested the dark region behind the woman was not uniform pigment. Spectral analysis showed irregular absorption patterns inconsistent with oil paint. Composition of the 1880s. Some sections absorbed light rather than reflecting it, like depth, like void. When the researcher attempted to zoom into the high-resolution scan at 3 o'clock, he later admitted he timed it intentionally. The software crashed. The file corrupted beyond recovery. His final recorded comment before the crash. There's movement when I enlarged the shadow. He did not disappear, but he refused further involvement. He publicly stated the painting should not be digitized, not because of superstition, because magnification changes proportion. And proportion, he argued, is how it measures you. Theories multiplied. Some claim the painting is a ritual Ankaran object used to bind something between dimensions. Others argue it functions as a psychological trigger, exploiting suggestion and sleep cycle vulnerability. Skeptics insist that disappearances are coincidence layered with myth. But explain this. Every confirmed vanishing associated with the painting occurred within a confined interior space. No forced exits, no evidence of flight. And each individual had reportedly stood within less than 12 inches of the canvas shortly before disappearing. No one who remained farther than 3 feet has ever vanished. Coincidence or radius? Consider that the warning carved into the back frame, in faded graffiti discovered during restoration in Vienna, was not in German, nor Czech. It was Latin, roughly translated. It read, "What watches may welcome. Welcome where? Into the darkness, into the painted space, into whatever stands behind the woman." And here's the final documented detail, before we move to the next part. Infrared photography revealed faint underpainting beneath the visible portrait. Another figure originally stood beside the woman, but that figure was painted over deliberately, covered by thick layers of black, erased. Yet traces remain beneath the surface, meaning at some point in its creation, the painting contained 2 subjects. Now it shows one in front, and something else behind. And with each disappearance, observers claim the background grows slightly deeper, slightly fuller, slightly less empty. So ask yourself something. If you stood before it right now, and leaned closer, would you see only darkness? Or would you see someone standing inside it, watching you back? This is only the second phase, because in part 3, we opened the evidence they tried to seal, and what investigators found when they finally examined the canvas under forced light at exactly 3 a.m. was something no one expected. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. Warning: what happened next was never meant to be public, and if you are watching this past 3 a.m., turn the lights on, because this is the part they tried to erase. After the Berlin disappearance, the painting was quietly seized for private evaluation. It was not officially logged into any national archive, but internal correspondence later traced its temporary transfer to a controlled storage facility outside Munich. The building was described as a climate-regulated art preservation site used for insurance disputes and high-value artifact verification. No paranormal division, no occult specialists, just analysts, conservators, and security staff. At least that was the public explanation. Unofficially, 3 independent researchers were invited to observe the painting under controlled conditions during a single overnight session. The objective was simple: debunk the myth, disprove the movement, disprove the disappearances, prove it was hysteria amplified by suggestion. The painting was mounted in a neutral white examination room under fixed lighting, 2 static cameras, 1 infrared, 1 thermal. A biometric monitor was attached to the primary observer, a conservator who agreed to stand within 12 inches of the canvas at exactly 2:59 a.m. and maintain eye contact until 3:05. That was the plan. At 2:45 a.m., everything was normal. Air pressure stable, temperature steady. The woman in the painting appeared unchanged. The dark background behind her shoulder remained flat and matte under inspection. At 2:52, the thermal camera registered a slight temperature drop, not in the room but localized around the canvas surface. Less than 1 degree. Dismissible. At 2:57, the biometric monitor on the observer recorded elevated heart rate, despite no visible distress. At 2:59, he stepped forward, 12 inches away, exactly as the previous disappearances suggested. He later stated in debrief transcripts that the darkness behind the woman felt further away than it should. Not visually, spatially, like standing at the edge of a hallway that had no visible walls. 3 a.m., the timestamp on the footage flickered for a fraction of a second. Not a full glitch, just a stutter. The observer did not blink. He leaned slightly closer. 11 inches, 10. His breath fogged the varnished surface. The room lights did not change. The cameras did not cut. But the thermal feed recorded something that investigators could not explain. The canvas surface temperature dropped sharply in a vertical shape directly behind the woman's painted shoulder. Not across the whole painting, just in one elongated column, as if something colder than the room was standing there. At 3:01 a.m., the observer whispered something. Audio enhancement later isolated the words, "It's wider." When questioned, he clarified he meant the dark space looked wider than earlier measurements suggested. The painting frame had not moved, but the proportion of shadow had increased. At 3:02, the biometric monitor spiked. Heart rate jumped from 82 to 134 in seconds. He did not step back. Instead, he leaned forward until his forehead nearly touched the canvas. That was when the infrared camera captured the anomaly. For 3 frames less than half a second, the dark background behind the woman was not flat. It had depth, a layered gradient not visible in normal light. And inside that gradient, a faint human outline appeared. Shoulders, head, slightly tilted, facing outward, facing him. The observer exhaled sharply. At 3:03 a.m., he reached out, not to touch the woman's face, to touch the darkness. His fingers stopped, 1 inch short of contact. He later claimed he felt resistance in the air, like pushing against thick water. The audio captured a low-frequency vibration subsonic, barely audible. The thermal camera registered a cold imprint forming on the canvas surface, exactly where his fingers hovered. At 3:04 a.m., the main camera glitched, not static, not black. It repeated the previous 3 seconds of footage on loop, while the real-time timestamp continued advancing, meaning what viewers saw was not what was happening. The infrared feed, however, did not loop. It showed the observer, stepping half a pace forward, closer than physically possible, without touching the frame. His outline blurred for a fraction of a second, then sharpened, then blurred again. The room lights flickered once, and at 3:05 a.m., the loop ended. The main feed resumed normal live footage. The observer was standing exactly where he started, 12 inches away, hands at his sides. Calm heart rate descending. When asked what happened during the 2-minute gap, he frowned. He insisted no time had passed. He claimed he had not moved closer than instructed. He denied reaching toward the painting. Yet the infrared footage clearly showed him doing exactly that. Investigators confronted him with the recording. He stared at it for several seconds, then said something chilling. "There should be 3 now." "3 what?" they asked. He refused to clarify. The examination ended at 3:15 a.m. The painting was covered with a neutral cloth and returned to storage. The observer was escorted home. The next morning, he did not report to work. Security footage from his apartment building showed him entering at 4:12 a.m. He never exited. His door was locked from the inside, windows sealed, no signs of struggle. When authorities forced entry, the apartment was empty. On his living room wall, however, investigators found something impossible. A charcoal sketch pinned above the sofa, a rough drawing of the painting's dark background, and within it 3 faint silhouettes. Not 1, not 2, 3, all facing outward, height proportions matching the missing collector, the Vienna restorer, and the Berlin gallery visitor. This detail was never released publicly. It surfaced years later through an anonymous leak tied to internal insurance litigation. Official statements labeled the Munich incident as equipment malfunction combined with psychological stress, but no explanation was given for the temperature drop, or the infrared silhouette, or the missing observer. The painting was declared too controversial for public exhibition and transferred again under sealed documentation. Its current location remains unverified. Some claim it resides in a private vault in Zurich, owned by an anonymous collector who believes the myth enhances its value. Others insist it was dismantled, canvas removed from frame, surface cut and burned. Yet underground art forums occasionally report sightings. A portrait of a woman, dark background, increasing depth, and a warning scribbled somewhere on the back. Do not stand too close. Here is what makes this case different from ordinary haunted object lore. Most cursed artifacts produce chaos around them. This one produces absence. No blood, no violence, no broken glass. Just people stepping to near and never stepping back. And if the Munich infrared footage is genuine, then the darkness inside the painting is not symbolic. It is cumulative. Each disappearance does not erase a victim. It adds one, which raises a question no one involved wanted to ask. Is the painting consuming observers, or inviting them inside? Because if 3 silhouettes were visible after the Munich test, how many are there now? And what happens when the background is no longer large enough to hold them? In part 4, we examine the most disturbing theory yet, the possibility that the painting does not take randomly. It selects, and some believe the selection begins long before you ever see it. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare. The Munich incident was just the beginning. The painting of the veiled lady wasn't just a cursed object. It was a predator. And now, it was gone again, vanished from the scorched remains of the gallery, leaving only whispers and a chilling question. Who would be next? Investigators were baffled. Art historians were terrified. But one researcher, a reclusive parapsychologist named Dr. Alistair Finch, had a theory. He believed the painting didn't just bring misfortune. It chose its victims with chilling precision. He spent years tracing its dark history, from forgotten European manors to exclusive private collections. A pattern emerged. Each owner had something in common: a deep, hidden vanity, a desperate need to be seen, to be admired, to possess beauty that others could only dream of. The painting fed on that desire. It would appear perfect at first, its subject almost alive behind the veil. But slowly, the owner would change. They'd become obsessed, staring into the canvas for hours, convinced the veiled lady was whispering secrets to them, promising them eternal beauty. They'd withdraw from the world, their own reflection becoming a source of horror as the paintings seemed to drain their vitality, their youth, their very essence. Now, across the globe in New York City, a young, ambitious tech billionaire named Julian Croft has just acquired a mysterious masterpiece for his penthouse collection. He's known for his ruthless ambition and his obsession with perfection. Late one night, as he unveils his new prize, he feels a strange coldness in the room. He stares at the canvas, at the veiled figure that seems to be looking right back at him. He doesn't know it yet, but the painting has found its new home, and it's hungry. The hunt has begun again. If you love diving into mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more chilling tales coming your way. Thanks for watching. They say grief can make you see things, that it can warp reality until you untell what's real and what's a phantom of your own sorrow. I used to believe that. I used to be a rational person, an art historian who dealt in facts and dates, not ghosts and curses. But that was before my brother, Liam, died, and before I found the painting. It was called The Mourner's Gaze. I discovered it in a dusty corner of a forgotten antique shop a few weeks after the funeral. The air in the shop was thick with the smell of decay and forgotten memories. But the painting? It called to me. It depicted a woman, draped in black, her face obscured by shadow, save for her eyes. Those eyes, they were pools of endless, fathomless grief, a reflection of the gaping hole in my own heart. The shop owner, a man with a face like crumpled parchment, sold it to me for a pittance, almost eager to be rid of it. He just muttered something about it, finding its rightful owner. I hung it in my study, right across from my desk. At first it was a comfort. I'd look up from my research, my eyes blurry with unshed tears, and meet the woman's gaze. It was like she understood. She knew the weight of my loss, the silent scream trapped in my chest, I started talking to her, whispering Liam's name, telling her stories about our childhood. It felt less lonely. Then, the strange things started. Small things at first. A book falling from a shelf. A cold draft in a sealed room. The distinct feeling of being watched, even when I was alone. I'd catch a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, a shadow darting just out of sight. I blamed it on exhaustion, on the grief that clung to me like a shroud. One evening, I was working late, researching the provenance of a 17th century triptych. The house was silent, except for the scratching of my pen on paper. Suddenly, a soft sound echoed from the living room, the gentle, melancholic notes of a piano. It was the melody from a music box Liam had given me when we were kids. My blood ran cold. The music box was in his room, untouched since he passed. I crept out of the study, my heart hammering against my ribs. The music grew louder, drawing me toward the living room. The door was slightly ajar. Peeking through the crack, I saw the piano keys moving, pressed down by unseen fingers. The music box sat on top of the closed piano lid, its tiny ballerina spinning gracefully. I slammed the door shut, my breath catching in my throat, and ran back to my study, locking the door behind me. My eyes darted to the painting. The woman's gaze seemed different, deeper, almost satisfied. That night, sleep offered no escape. I dreamed I was in a long, dark corridor lined with paintings. Each one depicted a person with eyes, just like the woman in my painting, filled with despair. As I walked, I heard whispers, names being called from the canvases. At the end of the hall was an empty frame with a small, gleaming brass plate. I leaned closer to read the inscription. It said, Alina. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. The next day, I decided to research the mourner's gaze. As an art historian, I had access to archives most people never saw. I started digging. There was no official record of the artist, no gallery showings. It was a ghost. Finally, deep within a digital archive of old newspapers and forgotten journals, I found a reference. An article from 1889, from a small town in New England. It described a series of mysterious deaths, all involving individuals who had recently lost a loved one. Each victim had owned a peculiar painting of a grieving woman. The article was titled, The Portrait That Feeds on Sorrow. My hands trembled as I read. According to the journalist, the painting was created by an artist named Alistair Finch, a recluse who lost his wife in a tragic accident. Consumed by grief, he tried to capture her sorrow on canvas, but instead, he channeled something else entirely. Something ancient and malevolent. The entity within the painting fed on the anguish of the bereaved, growing stronger with each soul it consumed. The victims would experience escalating paranormal activity, their grief twisted and amplified until it drove them to madness or despair, making them easy prey. A chill snaked down my spine. The music box, the whispers. It wasn't my grief playing tricks on me. It was the painting. It was feeding on me. I raced home, my mind in a panic. I had to destroy it. I burst into my study, grabbing the heaviest object I could find, a bronze bust of Marcus Aurelius. I stood before the painting, my hands shaking. The woman's eyes stared back at me, no longer sorrowful, but hungry. A low whisper slithered through the room, coiling around me. It sounded like Liam. Alina, don't leave me. Tears streamed down my face. It was his voice, his tone, everything. I'm so lonely, Elle. Stay with me. The voice was coming from the painting. The woman's painted lips seemed to curve into a faint, cruel smile. The grief I had been trying to process, to overcome, came rushing back, a tidal wave threatening to drown me. My resolve faltered. My arm, holding the heavy bust, began to lower. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should just stay. Suddenly, a memory broke through the fog of despair. Liam, a few months before he died, grinning at me. You're the strongest person I know, Elle. Don't ever let anything break you. His real voice, his real memory. Not this twisted, hollow echo. Anger, fierce and hot, surged through me, burning away the sorrowful haze. This thing wasn't honoring Liam's memory. It was defiling it. It was using my love for him as a weapon against me. "You are not my brother," I screamed, my voice raw. With a final guttural yell, I swung the bust. It connected with the canvas with a sickening crunch. The painting didn't tear. Instead, a high-pitched shriek, like scraping metal, and 1,000 tortured voices erupted from it. The eyes in the portrait glowed with a malevolent red light. The entire room plunged into an icy cold, and the air crackled with energy. The frame shook violently on the wall. The woman's face contorted, shifting from sorrow to pure, unadulterated rage. Shadows writhed in the corners of the room, clawing at the walls. I didn't stop. I struck it again and again, fueled by a desperate, protective fury. With each blow, the shriek grew louder, more agonizing. Cracks began to spiderweb across the canvas, not like paint, but like shattering glass. A foul black ooze, thick as tar and smelling of grave dirt, began to seep from the fractures. Finally, with one last, mighty heave, the canvas ripped open completely. A blast of frigid air and spectral energy threw me backward. The shriek cut off abruptly, replaced by an unnerving silence. The black ooze evaporated into a foul-smelling smoke, and the oppressive atmosphere in the room vanished, replaced by the clean, crisp air of the evening. I lay on the floor, gasping for breath, cuts on my hands from the shattered frame. The painting was destroyed. The canvas was a mangled ruin, the image of the woman gone, leaving only a gaping black void. I looked at the wreckage, and for the first time since Liam's death, I felt a sliver of peace. The grief is still there. It probably always will be. But it's my grief now, not a tool for some parasitic entity. It's a quiet ache, a testament to a love that was real. Sometimes, late at night, I still think I hear a faint whisper on the edge of hearing, a sad, lonely sound. But I know it's just the wind. I have to believe it's just the wind. Because some artifacts are more than just history. Some stories are warnings, and some gazes you should never, ever meet. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe out there. Warning, if you are still watching, you are already closer than you think. Because the final theory surrounding the painting is not about what it has taken. It is about what it is preparing to release. For decades, investigators focused on disappearance, on the missing bodies, the sealed rooms, the expanding shadow. But in 2021, a private security contractor in Geneva leaked a detail that reframed everything. According to internal transport manifests, the painting had been moved again, not to a gallery, not to a collector's home, but to a subterranean vault facility designed for high-risk artifacts, climate-controlled, no public access, no photography allowed. And yet, even there, the pattern continued. Guards assigned to the corridor outside the secured chamber reported something subtle during overnight shifts. Not movement, not sound, pressure, a sensation of standing too near the edge of something vast. One guard described feeling as though the hallway behind him stretched further than its physical dimensions. Another claimed he avoided looking directly at the covered frame because the air bent around it. These statements were dismissed as stress responses until the first internal audit at 3 a.m. Security protocol required hourly visual confirmation. At 2:59 a.m., the painting was recorded as stationary, draped, leaning against a reinforced wall. At 3 a.m., the hallway camera flickered, just once. At 3:01, the guard assigned to check the vault keycarded inside. The interior camera showed him standing 3 feet from the covered object. He hesitated. He later told supervisors he heard breathing that did not match his own. Slow, measured, patient. He did not remove the cloth. He did not step within 12 inches. He stayed exactly 3 feet away, and nothing happened. He exited safely. That detail is critical. Distance still mattered. But over the following weeks, multiple guards reported the same distortion of spatial awareness, as if the room felt larger from the inside than its recorded dimensions. Engineering inspections found no structural anomalies, no hidden chambers, no subsidence, just concrete walls, a solid foundation, and one covered painting. Then came the anomaly no one expected. During a quarterly inventory, conservators were required to inspect the canvas condition. For the first time in years, the cloth was removed under full-spectrum lighting. High-resolution scans were taken, measurements logged. The woman's figure remained unchanged, but the darkness behind her had deepened in tone beyond what pigment aging could explain. Spectrographic analysis indicated light absorption properties inconsistent with oil paint chemistry. It was as if the surface was swallowing illumination. One technician made the mistake of stepping forward for a closer look. 11 inches, 10, 9. He did not disappear. Instead, he stumbled backward suddenly, reporting intense vertigo. He claimed the background was not flat. He said it curved inward, like looking into a tunnel. Medical evaluation found no neurological cause, but his statement triggered a review of archived scans from Prague, Vienna, Berlin, Munich, Florence, and London. When layered chronologically, the progression was undeniable. The void had expanded incrementally over decades. And more disturbingly, the silhouettes were no longer faint distortions. Under infrared enhancement, at least 7 distinct humanoid outlines could now be detected within the dark field. 7. That number does not match public disappearances. It exceeds them, which means one of two things is true. Either additional victims were never documented, or the painting does not require physical proximity every time. That realization birthed the most dangerous theory yet. What if the painting is not only a container but a threshold? What if the silhouettes are not consumed bodies, but impressions, echoes of those who stepped too close? And what if, when the background reaches capacity, the direction reverses? Consider the architecture of the image. The woman stands at the forefront, calm, neutral, almost inviting. The darkness behind her frames her like a doorway. Every disappearance increases that doorway's depth. Every silhouette fills the corridor. But doors do not only lead inward, they also open outward. In late 2022, an unverified image surfaced on an encrypted forum associated with underground art traders. The photo allegedly showed the painting in its Geneva vault location. The woman appeared unchanged, but behind her one silhouette seemed closer to the edge than before, not centered deep within the shadow, near the threshold. Enhanced contrast revealed what looked like a face shape angled slightly forward, as if pressing against glass. Experts dismissed it as pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive faces in noise. But then the forum user who posted the image wrote a final message before deleting their account. It's not expanding anymore. It's thinning. That word terrified analysts more than expansion ever did. Because expansion implies accumulation. Thinning implies barrier erosion. If the darkness is not simply growing, but becoming permeable, then the painting is no longer just an object that takes. It may become something that releases. And if that release occurs at the same hour every documented anomaly has occurred 3 a.m., then the pattern is not random, it is scheduled. This would explain the Geneva guards' reports of altered spatial perception. The hallway did not physically stretch. The boundary between dimensions may have softened. That sounds dramatic. Impossible. But remember, temperature drops localized within the canvas shape. Infrared silhouettes, locked room vanishings, increasing light absorption. No conventional explanation addresses all these variables simultaneously. Now imagine this. 7 silhouettes inside, each once a living person, each perhaps conscious within that corridor of dark. If the barrier weakens, what steps back through? Does it return as itself, or as something shaped by the void? The Latin inscription warned, what watches may welcome. Welcome can be mutual. A door does not choose who crosses. It simply stands open. Here is the final detail, and it has never been confirmed publicly. During a routine Geneva shift last winter, one guard reportedly saw something impossible. At 2:59 a.m., he stood outside the sealed vault chamber. At 3 a.m., The hallway lights dimmed slightly, not a blackout, just a fluctuation. Through the reinforced observation window, he claimed he saw the covered painting tilt forward on its support brace, not fall, tilt, as though leaning toward the door. He froze. The cloth did not fall away, but for a fraction of a second, he said he saw an outline pressing against the fabric from underneath, from the inside. He did not open the chamber. He did not step closer. He kept his distance, and nothing breached containment. Officially, no such incident occurred. Unofficially, that guard resigned 2 days later. So here we stand at the edge of the final question. If the painting's darkness is full of, the silhouettes have reached their limit, then the next phase is not disappearance. It is emergence. An emergence does not require you to stand too close. It requires only that the barrier grows thin enough, which means the safest place is not within 12 inches. It may not even be within the same room, because if the corridor behind the woman extends beyond the canvas boundaries, then distance becomes meaningless. Look around you right now. The walls, the shadows, the corner of your room where light doesn't fully reach. What if that darkness is not absence? What if it is connected? Every documented case began with someone leaning closer, but none recorded what happened after the void filled. We may be approaching that moment, and if you ever encounter a portrait of a woman standing before unnatural depth, if you ever feel understood while staring into painted eyes, remember the rule that has never failed. Do not stand too close, because the next silhouette may not form behind her, it may form behind you. Subscribe to Tales of the Dark, where every story gives you a nightmare.